Millions of residents and strategic planners in Southern California are betting the safety of their entire infrastructure system on monitoring the San Andreas fault. They are looking in the wrong place. Right now, the true epicenter of tectonic volatility is not located on that famous fault line. It is converging deep beneath a buffer zone that has quietly triggered nearly 400 earthquakes in less than 48 hours. This data is not a statistical error from measurement devices. This is the Brawley earthquake swarm. This phenomenon is absolutely not a series of random tremors occurring in a vacuum. These are continuous waves of kinetic energy striking directly at a critical weak point, a physical bottleneck connecting the San Andreas system in the north and the Imperial fault in the south. Instead of producing a single massive rupture, this underground system is employing a tactic of structural attrition. The level of energy release has quietly escalated from a magnitude 4.5 to 4.7. This earthquake struck just about 3 kilometers west-southwest of the Brawley residential area. When a geological transition zone suddenly awakens and unleashes hundreds of tremors in the magnitude 4 range, the equilibrium we see on the surface of our infrastructure is merely a temporary illusion. The single greatest error of regulatory agencies in public perception is nonlinear denial, the tendency to always prepare for a single, clear, and predictable disaster scenario rather than a decentralized cascading network collapse. They forget that structural destruction does not necessarily begin with a massive frontal rupture. Instead, it often originates from silent attrition at transitional joint. The current Brawley earthquake swarm is a perfect case in point, demonstrating how the system is restructuring underground pressure in the most unpredictable manner. An overfocus on the main San Andreas fault line has created a severe strategic blind spot, leaving emergency response frameworks highly vulnerable to being blindsided by secondary fault networks that are continuously resonating energy. To understand why this specific location is lighting up on all seismic radars, we must dissect the deep physical mechanics of this subterranean engine. The area south of the Salton Sea in Imperial County does not possess a clean and continuous tectonic fracture like the main body of the San Andreas. As the massive San Andreas system descends from the north and terminates in this area, while the Imperial Fault continues deep south across the Mexican border, the Earth's crust in between cannot withstand the tearing force. It shatters, forming a chaotic buffer zone with countless small fault lines interwoven like a pane of glass struck by a sledgehammer, but not completely broken. The thermodynamic and tectonic reality at the Brawley seismic zone is defined by a physical mechanism called transtension. In a standard strike-slip fault, 2 tectonic plates simply scrape past each other. But at Brawley, the massive Pacific plate and the North American plate do not just scrape. The ground here is actively being pulled apart and sliding sideways at the same time. This continuous stretching severely weakens the thickness and integrity of the crust. The tearing of the ground creates underground physical voids, allowing new fault branches to constantly form. The thinning crust paves the way for immense geothermal heat and superheated fluids to rise, interacting directly with the fault system. Heated rock alters the friction coefficient. The subterranean fluids act as a planetary scale lubricant. This complex intersection between pure tectonic pressure and geothermal activity explains exactly why Brawley acts as an engine, generating prolonged seeping seismic swarms. It does not follow the rule of releasing a main shock accompanied by fading aftershocks. Its nature is a highly unstable braid, scorching underground network that must constantly transfer the immense momentum of 2 colliding continents. Here we confront a profound energy paradox. Humanity is attempting to construct a green future directly on top of a destructive engine. The area surrounding the Salton Sea has been widely hailed as the epicenter of a new energy transition, boasting massive lithium extraction projects and large-scale geothermal power plants. However, drilling deep into the earth, extracting superheated fluids and re-injecting them into this fragile, thinned crust may inadvertently be altering the hydrostatic pressure of the entire fault system. This represents a classic case of technological hubris. We exploit the very geothermal heat that weakens the Earth's crust to power our modern economy, yet we possess no means of controlling how these fluid dynamics lubricate geological fissures, effectively transforming an already unstable transition zone into a time bomb with a highly sensitive fuse. When this immense kinetic energy interacts with the surface, it directly collides with human geography and our infrastructural backbone. The Brawley settlement is situated entirely within this volatile seismic zone. The infrastructure risk here does not stop at the borders of a single city. We are talking about a highly interconnected tectonic ecosystem. Surrounding this epicenter is a series of heavily populated areas and critical infrastructure bottlenecks in Southern California. These include Westmoreland Ocotillo, Anza Borrego, Springs Indio, the Joshua Tree area, and the entire Salton Sea basin. This system has a long-standing history of seismic swarm outbreaks. This structural pressure is far wider and deeper than what the naked eye can see. If we expand our analytical map to a regional scale, we will see kinetic chains of a similar nature occurring simultaneously in areas housing the nation's most sensitive infrastructure. Looking at the adjacent Walker Lane fault network in Nevada, which encompasses the Tonopah nuclear test range, the top secret Area 51, and Naval Air Base Area 52, they are all facing similar seismic swarms. The structural integrity of high-tech foundations is being directly threatened by the unpredictable energy release of the planet. The core issue in a soft, multi-layered fracture
the small
crust like
farming
Brawley
town of
is
Guadalupe.
that the slip of a small fault can trigger a mechanical domino effect. It alters underground stress and breaks the next link in the transmission chain. Consequently, it directly threatens the entire built environment above ground. The biggest concern for strategic planners right now is not the 4.7 magnitude number itself. The real threat lies in its strategic location. It is resonating right inside the vital fault transition zone, connecting the Imperial system and the extreme southern tail of the San Andreas system. The most deceptive trap in damage assessment is focusing solely on collapsing buildings while overlooking invisible but vital supply chain links. The Imperial Valley is not an isolated wasteland. It is the winter agricultural basket of the entire United States. The lifeblood of this entire region depends on a massive concrete canal network, specifically the All-American Canal, which draws water from the Colorado River. A lateral displacement of just a few centimeters is enough to crack these canals, causing massive water loss and paralyzing the irrigation infrastructure. Once this water infrastructure fails, food supply lines break immediately, driving up national food inflation within weeks. This is a cascading systemic vulnerability where a subterranean release of kinetic energy can rapidly transform into a macroeconomic crisis on the surface. We must draw an absolutely clear line between verified field data and system forecasting models. As a matter of geological fact, the massive San Andreas fault system has not experienced a large-scale rupture in over 300 years. This period of silence is not a sign of peace. It is a delayed sentence. Monitoring devices ranging from topographic mapping satellites to underground creep meters all confirm a brutal reality: the southern tail of the San Andreas. The exact intersection and termination area near the Salton Sea is completely locked. It is silently accumulating a massive amount of kinetic stress, making it the highest risk location for the next catastrophic rupture. When a tectonic plate moves a few centimeters, a year 3 centuries multiplied creates a massive slip deficit. That energy does not simply dissipate. It is merely waiting for a mechanical breaking point. Current data indicates the Brawley earthquake swarm is continuously escalating in both the number of tremors and the amount of energy released. This system chain is evolving on its own. Contrasting these mathematical constants are scientific hypotheses heavily debated among experts. The most paramount question haunting seismologists and risk management teams right now is whether the Brawley earthquake swarm serves as the final catalyst for a full-scale San Andreas rupture. The underground stress transfer process, where a localized earthquake in a soft crust area alters pressure and triggers neighboring faults, is a documented physical mechanism. When the ground is torn apart in Brawley, the tension does not disappear but travels along fault lines, compressing into zones that are already heavily locked. Most current risk analysis models agree that triggering a mega-quake is a highly plausible scenario. However, historical data shows it remains an outlier rather than the most likely immediate outcome. Geophysicists propose a hypothesis regarding a limit stress test if the intensity of the Brawley swarm breaches the 5 magnitude threshold. This chain of events will step into an entirely new level of energy release. While that does not guarantee an immediate mega-quake, the underground structural situation will become exponentially more severe. Many optimistic analysts attempt to soothe public anxiety by arguing that small earthquake swarms act as a safety valve, releasing built-up energy and reducing the risk of a major earthquake. This is a flawed line of thinking, completely devoid of accurate mechanical foundations. In a highly locked and tightly coupled structural system like Southern California, localized energy release within a shattered crustal zone like Brawley does not dissipate the region's overall stress. Instead, it merely shifts and redistributes underground stress, focusing the accumulated pressure directly onto the 2 boundaries of the main fault systems. In other words, this seismic swarm is not a relief valve mitigating hazard. It is acting as a fuse, relentlessly knocking on the door of a southern San Andreas system that has been strained to its absolute structural limit for over 3 centuries. A quantitative change will inevitably lead to a qualitative collapse. Brawley is not an empty desert wasteland. The Imperial Valley and the Salton Sea constitute a highly complex infrastructure corridor packed with vital highway networks, massive irrigation canals, breathing life into Southern California's agriculture, and an extensive web of geothermal power plants. It is a profound irony that the very source of immense thermal energy, weakening the crust, and generating these earthquake swarms is being exploited by humans to spin electricity turbines. If the 5 magnitude threshold is crossed, structural erosion will no longer be confined to minor faults. It will begin to severely test the mechanical endurance of this foundational backbone infrastructure system. In terms of risk management strategy, data analysis must rely on continuous tracking of both the spatial clustering and the migration direction of the seismic swarm. If the kinetic energy remains tightly bound around Brawley, it may sustain its status as a classic local seismic event, a phenomenon this region has produced before without triggering a catastrophic system collapse. The absolute decisive variable is the system's trajectory of migration. The epicenter is not stationary. If instrumentation reports show earthquake activity purposefully drifting north toward Bombay Beach and aiming directly at the locked southern tail of the San Andreas fault at the Salton Sea, the systemic threat profile escalates to its maximum tier. We are looking at the razor-thin line between a mid-range local swarm and a permanent infrastructure severing disaster. Furthermore, we must continuously monitor the sympathetic cross-reactions of adjacent major fault systems. The Imperial Fault running south, the San Jacinto Fault Zone, and dozens of minor fault strands running through the Salton Trough could easily act as secondary trigger. The regional power grid, massive high-voltage substations, and critical pipeline networks crisscrossing these faults are all engineered to specific vibration thresholds. When multiple faults resonate within the same tight tectonic neighborhood, shaking amplitudes amplify exponentially. The underground engine is running relentlessly, energy is bleeding out, and the geographic trajectory of this force will dictate the survival of Southern California's built environment. Understanding the extreme vulnerability of this interconnected network is the first step in structural defense. Maintaining an objective analytical lens, relying on verified field data repositories, and closely monitoring micromigration trends is the only way to read this waking seismic engine. The cold truth is that our early warning systems can only buy a few seconds of reaction time. They cannot halt physical kinetic force. The survival of our infrastructure, spanning from the massive agricultural distribution network in the Imperial Valley to top-secret military testing sites across Nevada, depends entirely on our capacity to decipher these early precursor signals. If the tremor chain's migration actually breaches the southern San Andreas fault zone or shifts heavily into Bombay Beach, the state's entire emergency response protocol must activate instantly. The failure of a structurally weakened crust does more than collapse buildings. It severs critical transportation arteries, paralyzes central grid substations, and plunges an expansive military and civilian network into complete isolation. Continuously cross-referencing field data from the Brawley swarm with analogous fluctuations in neighboring zones reveals a comprehensive macro systems picture that cannot be ignored. The crust is not stationary. It is reacting systematically. This is a macro-kinetic shift. Our objective is never to propagate baseless speculation or incite panic. Navigating the gray area between verified field trends and scientific hypotheses regarding structural failure is the core focus here at American Skybrief. We are standing on an extraordinarily fragile surface, both geologically and in terms of our built infrastructure. Understanding that vulnerability through the lens of empirical real-time measurement data is our only true preparation for worst-case scenario. Continue to track earthquake magnitudes, the micromigration of the epicenter, and the structural load of adjacent fault lines. Keep your analytical mindset sharp and maintain a comprehensive overview of the system. Thank you for standing with us. See you in the next Macro Systems Analysis.